Every time I see you, I wonder if this is really the best I can do, she said while getting ready. The bathroom light cast harsh shadows across Marcus's face as he stood at the sink, trimming his beard with careful precision. It was a Saturday morning ritual, one he'd perfected over the 3 years he and Simone had lived together in their Harlem brownstone apartment. The electric buzzer hummed softly, a meditative sound that usually brought him calm. He could hear her moving around in the bedroom, the soft rustle of fabric, the click of jewelry being selected. This was their rhythm, the quiet choreography of a couple preparing for brunch with friends. Before he could analyze the feeling further, he heard her voice cut through the quiet hum of his grooming routine. Hello friends, before I continue the story, please support the channel by becoming a subscriber and giving the video a like. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching right now. Every time I see you, Simone said from the doorway, her tone carrying that peculiar flatness he'd learned to recognize as her truth-telling voice. I wonder if this is really the best I can do. Marcus's hand froze mid-stroke, the trimmer still buzzing against his jawline. He looked at her reflection in the mirror, waiting for context, for the smile that would soften the blow. She was leaning against the doorframe in her silk robe, arms crossed, her expression as casual as if she'd just commented on the weather. The buzzer felt suddenly loud, obscene in the silence that followed her words. He switched it off, and the absence of sound was deafening. What? He managed, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. She sighed, a sound weighted with exhaustion, as if he'd already failed some test by simply asking her to repeat herself. You heard me, Marcus. It's just something I think about sometimes. She pushed off from the doorframe, walking back toward the closet with an ease that suggested she'd just mentioned needing to pick up milk. Don't overthink it. Are you almost ready? Keisha said they're already at the restaurant. Her dismissal was somehow worse than the initial statement, a secondary wound delivered with surgical precision. He stood there, his reflection staring back at him, a successful software engineer with his own company, a man who'd bought her flowers every Friday without fail, who'd supported her through graduate school. The beard he'd been trimming now seemed ridiculous, a careful grooming of something she apparently found inadequate. Every time I see you, not once, not in a moment of anger, but repeatedly, consistently, every single time her eyes landed on him. The phrase replayed in his mind like a glitch in code, looping endlessly, breaking down the architecture of everything he'd believed about them. He looked at the man in the mirror and wondered who he'd been performing for all this time. Marcus set the trimmer down on the marble countertop with deliberate care, his hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. He walked into the bedroom where Simone was slipping into a cream-colored dress, one he'd complimented her on dozens of times. She was humming something under her breath, completely absorbed in the task of fastening a delicate gold necklace. The morning light streaming through their floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated her in a way that would have moved him just an hour ago. Now it felt like watching a stranger, beautiful but unknowable, like a painting in a gallery he'd never actually understood. I need a minute, he said quietly. She turned, irritation flickering across her features like a match strike. Marcus, we're already running late. What's the problem? The genuine confusion in her voice was almost impressive, as if she couldn't comprehend why her casual dismissal of his entire existence might require processing time. He looked at her, really looked, and saw for the first time the slight curl of impatience at the corner of her mouth, the way her eyes didn't quite meet his when she spoke to him. These were details he'd trained himself not to see, accommodating her moods and measurements as if his own feelings were negotiable. Just a minute, he repeated, and walked back into the bathroom, closing the door. He sat on the edge of the bathtub, his head in his hands, breathing slowly through the rising tide of something that felt like grief but sharper. 3 years of Saturday brunches and shared Netflix cues and inside jokes that now felt like a performance he'd been giving to an uninterested audience. 3 years of believing that love was something you built together, brick by brick, only to discover she'd been conducting silent inspections, finding the foundation lacking. He thought about the ring he'd been saving for, hidden in his gym bag in a box from a jeweler in the Diamond District. The cruel comedy of it almost made him laugh, a bitter sound that died in his throat. He stood up, looked at himself one final time in the mirror, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. When he emerged, Simone was checking her phone, her purse already on her shoulder, the picture of elegant impatience. "Finally," she said without looking up. "Can we please go now?" Marcus walked past her to the closet, pulled down his leather weekender bag from the top shelf, and set it on the bed. The sound of the zipper cutting through the silence made her look up, confusion replacing irritation on her carefully made-up face. "What are you doing?" "Packing," Marcus said simply, opening his dresser drawer and pulling out t-shirts, jeans, socks, rolling them with the efficient precision of someone who'd traveled for work conferences. He moved to the next drawer, gathering underwear, gym clothes, the physical components of a life he was systematically extracting. Simone stood frozen by the door, her mouth slightly open, her phone forgotten in her hand. "Packing? Marcus, what are you talking about? We have brunch in 30 minutes. Her voice had risen half an octave, the casual cruelty replaced now with something approaching alarm. He didn't answer, just continued his methodical inventory, moving through the room like a professional mover on a tight schedule. "Marcus, stop," she said, her voice sharper now, command mixed with confusion. "Stop and talk to me. What is happening right now?" He paused, a stack of folded dress shirts in his hands, and finally looked at her directly. "You said every time you see me, you wonder if I'm the best you can do." His voice was calm, almost eerily so, each word measured and clear. "I'm removing myself from that equation so you can find out." The color drained from her face in a way that would have concerned him yesterday. But today it was just another detail, noted and filed away. "That's not. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, setting her purse down, taking a step toward him. "Marcus, come on, you're being ridiculous. It was just a thoughtless comment." He zipped the bag closed and pulled his laptop case from under the bed, checking for chargers and hard drives with the same careful attention he gave to client presentations. A thoughtless comment would be saying, "I forgot to take out the trash." This was something else. He looked at her, this woman he'd imagined growing old with, and felt a strange detachment, as if he were already remembering her from a great distance. "This was you telling me the truth you've been thinking every day, and I'm grateful for it." Simone's expression shifted then, cycling through emotions like a wheel spinning. Shock, anger, fear, and finally settling on something like disdain. "You're really going to blow up 3 years over one sentence?" Her voice had an edge now, the vulnerability replaced by accusation. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Marcus. You're so sensitive, so dramatic. Normal couples work through things." He slung the bag over his shoulder, picked up his laptop case, and walked to his nightstand, gathering his wallet, keys, and watch. "Normal couples don't measure each other against hypothetical better options every single day," he said quietly. He walked to the desk in the corner of their bedroom, pulled out a piece of their expensive stationery, the kind she'd insisted they buy for thank-you notes they never sent, and wrote quickly in his neat, architectural handwriting. The pen scratched against paper, a sound amplified in the terrible silence between them. Simone watched him, her arms now wrapped around herself, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. When he finished, he placed his key to the apartment on top of the note, the metal against wood making a small final sound. He took a photo of both with his phone, documentation in case memory proved unreliable. "What does that say?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "It says you deserve to find out if you can do better," Marcus replied, picking up his bags. "And that I'll be collecting the rest of my things next week when you're at work. My number will be the same for logistics only." He looked around the bedroom one last time, at the reading chair he'd found at a vintage shop in Brooklyn, at the prints on the wall from their trip to New Orleans, at the life he was walking away from. There was no nostalgia, no wavering, just a clean, clear certainty that felt like the first honest thing he'd felt in months. "Marcus, wait," she started, but he was already moving toward the door. In the hallway, he could hear her following him, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "You can't just leave like this. We need to talk about this." Her voice was rising, panic threading through the words. He opened the front door, the cool October air from the stairwell rushing in, carrying the smell of someone's cooking and the distant sound of traffic. "There's nothing to talk about, Simone," he said, turning to look at her one final time. She was framed in the doorway of the apartment they'd chosen together, had painted together, had filled with the artifacts of a shared life that turned out to be far more his than theirs. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He descended the stairs of their brownstone without looking back, each step feeling lighter than the last. The morning sun hit him as he reached the street, warm on his face despite the autumn chill. Behind him, he could hear her calling his name, the sound growing fainter as he walked toward his car parked half a block down. His phone buzzed in his pocket, her already texting, but he didn't reach for it. The car, a sensible Honda Civic he'd bought used and meticulously maintained, sat waiting like a loyal friend. Marcus drove through Harlem's Saturday morning streets, past the familiar landmarks of his neighborhood, the barbershop where he got his fade every 2 weeks, the bookstore where he'd spent countless Sunday afternoons, the park where he and Simone used to walk. None of it felt like loss yet. It felt like scenery in a movie he was exiting early. His phone kept buzzing in the cup holder, a metronome of her escalating panic. At a red light on 125th Street, he finally picked it up and looked at the screen. 7 texts, each one a progression from confusion to anger to bargaining. The emotional stages of someone realizing their safety net had removed itself. He put the phone in the glove compartment and drove on. The extended stay America in White Plains wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, anonymous, and available immediately. The lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and the coffee from the complimentary breakfast station. The clerk, a middle-aged Dominican woman with kind eyes, processed his credit card without the invasive questions hotels usually asked. "Just you?" she asked, handing him a key card. "Just me," Marcus confirmed, and the words felt like a declaration of independence. The room on the 3rd floor was exactly what he needed. Aggressively beige, utterly impersonal, with a kitchenette and a desk and absolutely no memories. He dropped his bags on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking under his weight. The silence was different here. Not the loaded silence of the apartment, but a clean, empty silence that belonged only to him. His phone, retrieved from the car, showed 23 missed calls and a screen full of text notifications. Marcus opened his contacts, scrolled to Simone's name, and stared at it for a long moment. 3 years compressed into a contact card. A photo he'd taken of her laughing at something he could no longer remember. His thumb hovered over the screen, then tapped with decisive finality. "Block this contact." The confirmation dialogue appeared. "Are you sure you want to block Simone Williams?" Marcus looked at the question, at the photo, at the digital ghost of a relationship that had ended the moment she'd spoken her truth in their bathroom doorway. Yes, he was sure. He tapped the confirmation, and the contact disappeared, relegated to his blocked list where her calls would go unheard, her texts unread. The phone felt lighter in his hand suddenly, as if it had been relieved of a burden. He set it face down on the nightstand and lay back on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling, and allowed himself to simply breathe. Sunday morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the hotel curtains, illuminating dust motes in their lazy drift. Marcus woke without an alarm for the first time in months, his body clock reset by exhaustion and emotional evacuation. The bed was too soft, the pillows too flat, and he had never slept better. He showered in the small bathroom, using the generic hotel soap, and found a strange pleasure in the anonymity of it all. When he emerged, steam billowing out behind him, he caught his reflection in the mirror and saw something different. Not broken, but stripped down, foundational, ready to be rebuilt on his own terms. He spent the day establishing new routines with the deliberation of a monk entering a monastery. Coffee from the lobby, bitter but sufficient, drunk while researching apartments in neighborhoods he'd never considered. A run in a park he'd never visited, his feet pounding pavement that held no associations. Lunch at a diner where no one knew his name, where he could be completely invisible. His phone stayed silent, the block was holding, but his email began to fill with the digital debris of a relationship ending. Shared subscriptions, utility bills, credit cards with both names. He handled each one with clinical efficiency, severing connections, redirecting payments, erasing the infrastructure of their coupled life. By Monday morning, Marcus was back in his element, walking into the Manhattan offices of his software consulting firm with his laptop bag and a grande dark roast. His colleagues greeted him with the usual Monday morning casualness, unaware that the man returning their nods had dismantled his entire personal life 48 hours earlier. His partner, David, a Chinese-American developer he'd known since their MIT days, gave him a longer look. "You good, man? You look different." Marcus considered the question, the automatic deflection rising and dying on his tongue. "I'm figuring some things out," he said instead, and David nodded, reading the boundary in his tone, respecting it without question. Work became his meditation, lines of code his mantra. The project they were developing, a platform for nonprofit resource allocation, required total concentration, and Marcus dove in with an intensity that surprised even him. Problems that had seemed intractable the previous week suddenly revealed their solutions. His mind, freed from the constant background processing of Simone's dissatisfaction, operated with a clarity he'd forgotten was possible. He stayed late not out of avoidance, but out of genuine engagement, the satisfaction of building something that worked exactly as intended. At 8 p.m., David knocked on his office door, 2 beers in hand. "Okay, talk or don't talk, but you're drinking with me." They sat in Marcus's office, the Manhattan skyline glittering through the window like a circuit board. David sipped his beer, waiting with the patient silence of an old friend who knew when to push and when to sit. "Simone and I are done," Marcus said finally, the words simple and irrevocable. David's eyebrows rose, but he didn't interrupt, didn't rush to fill the silence with platitudes. "She made it clear I wasn't what she wanted, and I decided to take her at her word." He recounted the story without embellishment, the bathroom comment, the packing, the block, each detail delivered with the same precision he brought to code review. David listened, nodding occasionally, his expression growing darker. "Man," David said when Marcus finished, "that's ice cold on her part." He took a long pull from his beer, thinking, "But the way you handled it? That's some grown man shit right there." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he hadn't known was there. "I'm staying at an extended stay in White Plains until I find a place." David made a face. "Hell no, you're not. My sister's place in Fort Greene is empty. She's in London for 6 months for work, 2-bedroom, fully furnished, and she'd rather someone she trusts be there than leave it vacant." He pulled out his phone, already texting. "I'll send you the details. First month free. Then we'll figure out something fair." The apartment in Fort Greene was a revelation. A sunny 2-bedroom in a renovated brownstone with exposed brick and actual character. Marcus moved in that weekend with his single bag and David's help, the space echoing with possibility rather than emptiness. He bought only what he needed: a good mattress, quality cookware, a desk he assembled himself with methodical satisfaction. No couple's furniture, no compromise pieces, just clean lines and deliberate choices that reflected only his own aesthetic. The second bedroom became his home office, outfitted with monitors and a standing desk, a space optimized entirely for how he worked best. For the first time in 3 years, he hung art he'd chosen without consultation. Bold Afrofuturist prints from a Black-owned gallery in Bed-Stuy. The rhythm of his new life established itself like muscle memory. Morning runs through Fort Greene Park, the October air sharp and clarifying in his lungs. Coffee at the Dominican spot on DeKalb, where the owner, Miguel, learned his order after 3 days. Work that challenged and fulfilled him, projects he could pour himself into without the background radiation of domestic inadequacy. Evening walks through his new neighborhood, discovering bookstores and record shops and restaurants, building a map of a life that was entirely his own. His phone stayed clean and quiet, the blocked contact holding firm. He felt no temptation to check if she tried to reach him. That door was not just closed but sealed, painted over, built behind. 3 weeks into his new life, Marcus joined a gym in Clinton Hill, a Black-owned spot that focused on functional fitness rather than mirror posing. The community there was immediate and unpretentious. People who worked hard, encouraged each other, and minded their own business. His body responded to the consistency, muscles emerging from beneath the layer of comfort he'd accumulated. He wasn't trying to become someone else. He was excavating who he'd always been under the accumulated sediment of trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided he wasn't. The owner, a former Marine named Terrence, spotted him on a heavy bench press. "Whatever you're doing, man, it's working. You've got that look." "What look?" Marcus asked, racking the bar and sitting up. Terrence grinned, a gold tooth flashing. "Focused. Clear. Like you're done with the bullshit and locked in on yourself." Marcus felt the truth of it settle into his bones. "Yeah," he said, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. "Yeah, I guess I am." The conversation was brief, but it confirmed something Marcus had been sensing. He was visible again, not as half of a couple being quietly measured and found wanting, but as himself, solid and present. He finished his workout with a new PR on deadlifts, his body capable of more than he'd asked of it in years. Thanksgiving approached, and with it, the first real test of his new boundaries. His mother called from Atlanta, her voice warm and probing in the way only a black mother's could be. "Baby, what's happening with you and Simone for the holiday? Y'all coming down? Or should I send some plates up?" Marcus paused, standing in his Fort Greene kitchen, looking out at the November afternoon light. "Simone and I aren't together anymore, Ma." The silence on the other end was loaded, processing. "Since when? What happened? She seemed so nice when we met her at Easter." His mother's voice had shifted into investigative mode, concern and protection bundled together. Marcus took a breath. "She was nice, Ma," he said carefully. "But nice and right are different things." He gave her the abbreviated version, editing out the crueler details, just the essential facts. His mother listened without interruption, a skill she'd mastered during his childhood confessions. When he finished, there was another pause, and then her voice came back firm and clear. "Baby, I'm proud of you." The words hit him unexpectedly hard, his throat tightening. "For what?" His mother made that sound she always made when he asked obvious questions. "For knowing your worth and not letting someone convince you otherwise. Too many of our men stay in situations that diminish them because they think that's what loyalty looks like." They talked for another hour, his mother sharing stories he'd never heard about his father, about the quiet strength it took to walk away from wrong situations, about the importance of building a life you didn't need to escape from. By the time they hung up, Marcus felt fortified, validated in a way he hadn't realized he needed. He booked a flight to Atlanta for Thanksgiving week, looking forward to his mother's cooking and his nephew's chaos and the uncomplicated love of family. The holiday that would have been spent performing contentment in Simone's parents' Connecticut dining room would instead be real, messy, and entirely his own. He felt a wave of gratitude so intense it was almost dizzying. December arrived with early darkness and the first real cold, the kind that made Fort Greene's brownstone-lined streets look like a holiday movie. Marcus threw himself into year-end deliverables at work, his team closing out their biggest project with a launch that exceeded client expectations. The celebration at a bar in Tribeca was loud and genuine, colleagues toasting to the work and to each other, and Marcus found himself laughing, actually laughing, in a way that came from somewhere real. David pulled him aside near the end of the night, slightly drunk and sentimental. "You know what's crazy? You're better at your job now than you were 3 months ago, and you were already great." Marcus considered this, the truth of it, undeniable. "I have more space in my head," he said, the beer making him philosophical. "I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't." David nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Simone was always like that, man, even when we'd all hang out. She had this way of looking at you like you were a rough draft she was editing." The observation, coming from outside the relationship, confirmed what Marcus had felt but couldn't articulate. "She did exactly what she meant to do that morning," David continued. "She told you her truth. The strength was in believing her." Marcus raised his beer, and they clinked glasses. To believing people the first time. The year turned, and with it came an invitation that would test the fortress Marcus had built. His company was sending him to a tech conference in San Francisco, the same one he'd attended for the past 4 years. It was the industry's major networking event, a week of presentations, parties, and deal-making. His flight landed on a Tuesday afternoon, the Bay Area winter mild and misty compared to New York's bitter cold. He checked into his hotel, a boutique place in Soma that the company preferred, and reviewed his schedule. Wednesday afternoon, he was presenting on their nonprofit platform project, a slot he'd prepared for meticulously. He felt ready, energized even, standing in front of his mirror in his hotel room, reviewing his talking points. The presentation went better than expected, his delivery smooth and confident, fielding questions with an ease that came from genuinely loving the work. The audience of fellow developers and nonprofit leaders engaged thoughtfully, and afterward, several people approached him with business cards and collaboration ideas. He was riding that high, standing at a cocktail table in the networking area, drinking sparkling water and discussing API architecture with a developer from Seattle, when he felt it, that sixth sense of being watched. He looked up, and across the room, through the crowd of tech professionals in their uniform of button-downs and dark jeans, he saw her, Simone. She was staring at him, her face a complicated mix of emotions he no longer had the interest or energy to decode. She was moving toward him before he could process his own reaction, weaving through the crowd with that determined grace he remembered. She'd lost weight, he noticed clinically, and her hair was different, shorter. She was wearing professional attire that seemed like costume, like she was playing at belonging in this space. "Marcus," she said, arriving at his table slightly breathless. "Oh my God, hi!" The developer from Seattle looked between them, sensing the shift in atmosphere, and excused himself with practiced social grace. Marcus set his water down carefully, his face neutral, his body language closed. "Simone." He didn't offer more, just her name, acknowledgement devoid of warmth or invitation. "I can't believe you're here," she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I came with Keisha. She had an extra ticket and thought it would be good for me to network. I had no idea you were presenting." She was lying. He could see it in the way her eyes didn't quite meet his, the same tell she'd always had. "Your presentation was incredible, Marcus. You were so confident up there, so commanding." She reached out as if to touch his arm, then thought better of it, her hand hovering awkwardly before dropping. "You look amazing, different, like really different." He could smell her perfume, that same floral scent, and felt absolutely nothing, as if his body had developed immunity. "Thanks," Marcus said, his tone professionally polite, the voice he'd used with a persistent vendor. "I appreciate that." The silence between them opened up, and he made no move to fill it, just waited with the infinite patience of someone who owed nothing to the conversation. Simone's composure began to crack, her rehearsed casual encounter derailing. "Marcus, can we talk? Maybe get coffee? There's so much I need to say to you." Her voice dropped, becoming intimate, pleading. "What I said that morning, what I did, it was the worst mistake of my life. I've been in therapy. I understand now what I was doing, how I was sabotaging us because I was afraid of how good we were." Marcus looked at her, this woman who had once been the center of his universe, and felt a profound calm settle over him. "Simone, I don't think coffee would be helpful for either of us." His voice was gentle but absolutely firm, a door closing with a soft, final click. "That part of my life is over, and I've built something new that I'm very proud of." He could see the impact of his words landing, her face cycling through shock, hurt, and then a flash of anger. "I hope you're doing well, and I mean that sincerely, but there's nothing to revisit." He picked up his water glass, preparing to move away, to return to the networking that actually mattered. "You're really just going to dismiss me like this?" Simone's voice had an edge now, the vulnerability curdling into something sharper. "After 3 years, after everything we built, you can't even give me 30 minutes? People nearby were starting to glance over, sensing the rising tension. Marcus felt no embarrassment, no urge to manage her emotions or smooth over the scene. "I gave you 3 years, Simone," he said quietly, but with unmistakable finality. "You told me every time you saw me, you wondered if you could do better. I removed myself from that equation. He met her eyes directly, and she must have seen something there. Not anger, not pain, but complete and utter closure, because she stepped back as if pushed. "You've changed," she said, the accusation clear in her tone. "You're cold now. Hard." A laugh escaped Marcus before he could stop it. Genuine amusement at the projection. "No, I'm clear now. There's a difference." He glanced at his watch, a new piece he'd bought himself last month, a small celebration of a successful project. "I have another session to attend. Take care of yourself, Simone." He walked away without waiting for a response, weaving through the crowd toward the next presentation hall. Behind him, he could feel her staring, but he didn't look back, didn't hesitate. His phone buzzed in his pocket. David, asking how the presentation went, and he smiled, typing a response as he walked into his future. The rest of the conference was a triumph. New connections made, opportunities explored, his professional reputation enhanced. On the flight back to New York, Marcus looked out the window at the country passing below, patchwork farms and mountain ranges and the vast variety of America. He thought about the man who'd packed a bag in a Harlem apartment 4 months ago, hollowed out and uncertain. He thought about the fortress he'd built in that extended-stay hotel room, the boundaries he'd enforced, the life he'd constructed from scratch. That man and this man were the same person, but transformed, refined by the fire of being found wanting and choosing to see it differently. Not as a verdict on his worth, but as information about someone else's limitations. Back in Fort Greene, his apartment welcomed him with its clean lines and careful choices, every item a deliberate selection, every space optimized for his life alone. Marcus unpacked his suitcase, started a load of laundry, and made himself dinner. Salmon with roasted vegetables, a meal he'd taught himself to cook from a YouTube video. He ate at his dining table, music playing softly from his speaker, a jazz compilation he discovered on his own. His phone sat face up on the counter, no anxiety about what messages might arrive, no dread of casual cruelty disguised as observation. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of his own thoughts, his own breath, his own plans. He was thriving. The reports came anyway, filtering through the permeable membrane of mutual friends despite his best efforts at complete separation. At a January basketball game with college friends, someone mentioned that Simone had been asking about him. "She seems really torn up, man," his friend Jerome said during halftime, the kind of probing statement disguised as information. Marcus sipped his beer, watching the cheerleaders practice their routine. "That's unfortunate," he said, his tone genuinely neutral. "But it's not my concern." Jerome gave him a look, searching for the crack in his armor. "She's telling people she made a mistake, that you left over nothing." "I left because she told me every time she saw me, she wondered if she could do better," Marcus said calmly, no heat in his voice, just facts. "I took her at her word and removed myself from the situation. What she tells people afterward is her narrative to manage." Jerome sat back, processing this, and Marcus could see the realization dawn. This wasn't a breakup that needed friends to mediate or wounds that needed healing. Damn. Yeah. Okay, I get it. The subject changed to the game, to work, to anything else. Marcus appreciated Jerome's quick read, the respect in letting it drop. The conversation had served its purpose, establishing that the door was not ajar, not even cracked, but welded shut. Another probe came through Instagram, a mutual friend story showing a group dinner where Simone was visibly present, looking thin and drawn, the camera panning just long enough for Marcus to be tagged. A digital tap on the shoulder. He viewed it once, felt nothing, and moved on, not bothering to respond or unfollow. The algorithm would learn eventually. A week later, Keisha, who'd been more Simone's friend than his, sent a careful DM. "Hey Marcus, hope you're well. Just wanted to say Simone's really struggling. I know it's not my business, but she's beating herself up pretty badly. Any chance you'd be willing to talk to her? Even just a text?" Marcus read the message twice, considering his response, wanting to be clear without being cruel. "I appreciate you reaching out, and I hope Simone finds the support she needs," he typed carefully. "But closure is something she'll have to find on her own." Contact between us wouldn't be healthy for either of us at this point. He hit send, then added, I wish her well genuinely, but that chapter is completely closed. Keisha responded with a heart emoji and, understood. Take care. Marcus appreciated the clean acknowledgement, the lack of pushback. He didn't block Keisha. She'd respected the boundary, but he did mute the conversation. These were the final tendrils of his old life, reaching toward him reflexively, and each one was easier to sever than the last. He was learning the architecture of healthy separation, the engineering of boundaries that protected without requiring constant reinforcement. February brought Valentine's Day, that commercial minefield for the recently single, but Marcus found it utterly irrelevant to his experience. He worked late on the 14th, helping David debug a critical issue for a client, then walked home through Fort Greene's brownstone-lined streets where couples hurried to overpriced reservations. He felt no envy, no loneliness, just a comfortable solitude that had become his preferred state. At home, he made himself a perfect steak, poured a good bourbon, and spent the evening reading a novel he'd been saving, music playing softly, completely content in his own company. This was the clearest sign of his healing. Being alone on Valentine's Day and feeling grateful rather than bereft. Spring arrived with that sudden, dramatic shift that only New York could deliver, winter releasing its grip overnight. Marcus celebrated his 34th birthday with friends at a rooftop bar in Brooklyn, the skyline glittering across the water, surrounded by people who knew him as he was now, not as half of a couple. David gave a toast that made him laugh and then made him unexpectedly emotional. To Marcus, who had the strength to choose himself when it mattered most. They raised their glasses, and Marcus felt the warmth of genuine affection, of friendship that wasn't coupled with judgment or measurement. These were his people, chosen and choosing him back, no conditions attached. The nonprofit platform launched in April to genuine acclaim, written up in tech publications and adopted by organizations across the country. Marcus did interviews, appeared on panels, his professional reputation expanding beyond his immediate circle. He was recruited by 2 major companies, both offering significant salary increases and leadership positions. He considered them seriously, weighing options with only his own priorities in mind, no partner's career to accommodate, no compromise positions to settle into. Eventually, he declined both, choosing instead to double down on the consulting firm, taking on a partnership stake with David. They were building something meaningful, and for the first time in his professional life, Marcus had the clarity to recognize it and the freedom to commit fully. In May, at a bookstore reading in Bed-Stuy, Marcus met someone. Her name was Aisha, a psychiatric nurse practitioner with an easy laugh and eyes that held intelligence and warmth in equal measure. They talked about the author's work, then about books in general, then about the neighborhood, conversation flowing with uncommon ease. She was beautiful in an understated way, natural hair in twists, minimal makeup, the kind of woman who was completely comfortable in her own skin. When she suggested they continue the conversation over coffee, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Genuine interest, uncomplicated by ghosts. "I'd like that," he said, and meant it completely. Their coffee date turned into 4 hours at a Caribbean restaurant in Crown Heights, talking about everything: her work in mental health, his work in tech, her family in Barbados, his family in Atlanta. There was no performance, no measurement, just 2 people genuinely curious about each other. Aisha was direct in a way he appreciated, asking real questions and expecting real answers. "So what's your story with relationships?" she asked at one point, her directness disarming. Marcus paused, considering how much to share. "I got out of something serious about 8 months ago. She made it clear I wasn't what she wanted, and I respected that by leaving." Aisha nodded, her expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "How'd you leave?" she asked, the question unexpectedly perceptive. Marcus smiled, appreciating the precision of it. "Quickly and completely. Packed a bag, blocked her number, built a new life." Aisha's eyebrows rose, impressed rather than concerned. "That's clean. Most people drag it out for months, torture themselves trying to fix something the other person already broke." She took a sip of her sorrel. "For what it's worth, you seem incredibly grounded for someone who went through that recently." Marcus felt seen in a way that was affirming rather than exposing. I had good people around me, and I chose to focus on building rather than mourning. They talked until the restaurant started closing down around them, exchanging numbers with mutual enthusiasm. Over the next weeks, Marcus and Aisha saw each other with increasing frequency, a slow building of connection that felt fundamentally different from his relationship with Simone. There was no anxious checking of phones, no coded criticisms disguised as observations, no sense of being perpetually auditioned for a role he might not get. Aisha was present, enthusiastic, and refreshingly direct about what she wanted and felt. After their fourth date, a concert in Prospect Park, she turned to him as they walked home through the warm June night. I really like you, Marcus. This feels good to me, and I wanted you to know that clearly. Her honesty was like oxygen, and he breathed it in gratefully. I really like you too, he said, taking her hand for the first time, the contact electric and right. This feels different to me. Better. They talked about what they wanted. Aisha was looking for something real, potentially serious, but wanted to build it slowly and honestly. Marcus shared his own readiness to be open to connection, his healing that had made space for something new. They agreed to keep seeing each other, to stay honest, to let it develop naturally. Walking home alone later, Marcus felt a quiet joy that was completely distinct from the anxious attachment he'd mistaken for love with Simone. This was what it felt like when someone was genuinely excited to see you, when you weren't being measured against hypothetical alternatives. This was what it felt like to be chosen, enthusiastically and clearly. July brought a heat wave that turned Brooklyn into a sauna, and with it, the final test of Marcus's fortress. He was at a 4th of July barbecue at Terrence's house in Canarsie, Aisha by his side meeting his gym friends for the first time, when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize but whose area code he knew. He let it go to voicemail, continuing his conversation about seasoning techniques with Terrence's wife. Later, in the bathroom, he listened to the message, Simone's voice immediately recognizable despite the months of silence. Marcus, I know you blocked me, and I respect that, but I borrowed a friend's phone because I really need to talk to you. Her voice was strained, a quality he recognized as her particular brand of controlled desperation. I've been doing a lot of work on myself, and I understand now what I threw away. You were the best thing in my life, and my own insecurity destroyed it. She took a breath, and he could hear tears in her voice. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm just asking for a conversation, for a chance to apologize properly, to give you the closure you deserve. The message ended with her new number, spoken twice carefully. Marcus stood in Terrence's bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no temptation, no curiosity. The closure she wanted to give him, he'd already given himself. He deleted the voicemail, washed his hands, and returned to the backyard where Aisha was laughing at something David had said, fitting seamlessly into his world. He told Aisha about the call later that night as they walked along the boardwalk at Coney Island, the ocean breeze cutting through the humidity. My ex reached out. First time since I blocked her 8 months ago. Aisha looked at him, her expression open and curious rather than threatened. How'd that feel? Marcus considered the question, appreciating that she was asking about his emotional experience rather than seeking reassurance. Nothing, really, like getting a solicitation call. Aisha nodded, a smile playing at her lips. That's healthy. You going to respond? Marcus stopped walking, turning to face her in the glow of the carnival lights. No, that door is closed, and I have zero interest in reopening it for any reason. Aisha kissed him then, sweet and affirming, and when they pulled apart, she was grinning. Good. Not because I'm insecure, but because you deserve someone who doesn't need 8 months and a therapist to realize you're extraordinary. They walked on, hand in hand, and Marcus felt the final piece of his healing lock into place. He had chosen himself when it mattered most, built a life he didn't need to escape from, and in doing so had created space for someone who chose him with equal clarity. Simone was a relic now, a chapter in his history that had taught him the architecture of his own boundaries. He felt no bitterness toward her, just a profound gratitude for the clarity her cruelty had forced upon him. August found Marcus and David signing the lease on their own office space in downtown Brooklyn. their consulting firm growing beyond what they could manage from home. The new space had exposed brick, huge windows overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, and an energy that felt like potential given form. They hired their first 2 employees, both brilliant developers Marcus had mentored at various points. At the small launch party they threw, surrounded by friends and clients and colleagues, Marcus stood at the window looking out at the bridge's cables stretched against the summer sky. His phone buzzed. A text from Aisha, sending love and congratulations, saying she'd be there as soon as her shift ended. He smiled, pocketing the phone, feeling the solid weight of a life built on his own terms. David approached with 2 beers, handing one to Marcus with a knowing grin. "Remember when I found you in that extended stay in White Plains, looking like you'd survived a shipwreck?" Marcus laughed, the memory distant but clear. "I remember feeling like I'd lost everything and had no idea who I was without her." David clinked his beer against Marcus's. "And now look at you, partner in a growing firm, new relationship that's actually healthy, living your best life while she's—" He trailed off, shrugging. Marcus finished the thought. "While she's working through her own journey, which has nothing to do with me." The lack of bitterness in his voice was genuine, a sign of how complete his healing had been. The party flowed around them, laughter and music filling the new space with life. Marcus thought about the man he'd been a year ago, sitting on the edge of a bed tying his shoes, watching Simone prepare for a party, about to hear the words that would detonate his life. He thought about the fortress he'd built in that motel room, the boundaries he'd enforced, the silence he'd chosen over the noise of someone who diminished him. He thought about the slow, patient work of rebuilding, of discovering that he was not just enough, but more than enough, entire unto himself. And he thought about Aisha, about the ease and joy of being with someone who saw him clearly and chose him enthusiastically, every single time. Aisha arrived an hour later, bringing that energy she always carried, hugging him with unself-conscious affection. She fit immediately into the celebration, charming his employees and ribbing David with the familiarity of someone who belonged. Marcus watched her move through his world, feeling a contentment so profound it was almost alarming. This was what it felt like to be with someone who added to your life rather than auditing it, who saw you as a destination rather than a waypoint to something better. They left the party together as the Brooklyn night settled in warm and full of possibility, walking to the train hand in hand. "I'm proud of you," Aisha said as they waited on the platform, "for everything you've built." "I'm proud of me too," Marcus said, the statement feeling revolutionary in its simplicity. A year ago he would have deflected, diminished, made himself smaller. Now he could acknowledge his own worth without qualification or apology. The train arrived, and they found seats together, Aisha's head on his shoulder as Brooklyn rushed past the windows. Marcus's phone buzzed one final time, a text from a number not in his contacts, Simone's new number from the voicemail. "I know you probably won't read this, but I need you to know that losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. You were the best I could do, and I was too stupid to see it. If there's any chance." Marcus didn't read the rest. He simply blocked the number, deleted the message, and put his phone away. Aisha felt him move and looked up. "Everything okay?" Marcus kissed her forehead, a gesture of uncomplicated affection. "Everything's perfect." And it was. Not because his life was without complexity or challenge, but because it was entirely his own, built on a foundation of self-respect and clear boundaries. He had walked away from someone who saw him as a settlement and into a life where he was celebrated. The fortress he'd built wasn't about keeping everyone out. It was about knowing exactly who deserved to be let in. As the train carried them through the Brooklyn night toward home, toward the life he'd chosen and built and earned, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in the 3 years with Simone. He felt free. He felt whole. He felt like the absolute best he could possibly do was exactly who he already was. Thank you for watching all the way through. There's another story to your left screen. You'll enjoy it more than this one.